Okay, so it's a little after 1:30. I'll go ahead and get started. This talk is called Gr8Workshops. It's a case study in teaching Groovy to beginners. Uh, if you want to keep in touch, follow me. It's Jen Strader, or you can follow the organization Great Ladies as well. So a little bit about me. Like I said, my name's Jen Strader. My company does not give me, well, sent out an email this week threatening to sue me if I use their name or logo, so I have redacted that, and I'm not very happy about it at all. I'm a software engineer there. I work doing mostly healthcare IT things on a communications platform. I am out of Minneapolis. It wasn't too far to get here today, and weather held out, thank goodness. Outside of work, I run an organization called Great Ladies. It's on the next slide, but I did co-found that with another software engineer in Minneapolis. My focus within Great Ladies is mostly on retention and professional development. So this organization, Great Ladies, and as part of trying to outreach, that's what brings me here. So like I said, we're an organization. We support women in the Gr8, that's Groovy, Grails, Gradle, etc. community. Our focus is on education, professional development, networking, and retention. We currently have a chapter in Minneapolis, Minnesota that I and my co-founder run, and we are starting up a new chapter with a group in Austin, Texas. As part of Great Ladies, we have started, along with people from the Groovy community outside of Minneapolis and all over the world, really, this organization and an initiative that we call Gr8Workshops. Now, the purpose of this is to offer free or low-cost weekend courses to teach Groovy or other community or technologies surrounding the Groovy ecosystem. Our audience traditionally has been beginners who've never coded before, and this is one of the things that we think makes it unique. As far as we know, we're the only organization teaching Groovy as a first language. Our other track is to teach experienced developers who are just interested in learning new languages and technologies as part of a professional development or skill change. This is all run by volunteers. We get lots of help and experts from our local community, including GUM, which is the Groovy Users of Minnesota. After this, we are hosting our next workshop December 6th and 7th in Minneapolis. The Eventbrite for that will go out early next week for anyone who may be interested in taking one of our courses. Right now, we're still working out a few of the details. Okay. So the goals of today's talk are to talk about how programming is taught in general and the idea of a skills shortage. I want to do that by evaluating current teaching models for post-secondary education and provide some helpful hints that we've learned as part of the Gr8Workshops initiative. Beginning is going to be a brief overview. A lot of it may be pretty boring, but the exciting part and what I want to do is have a group discussion about and guided through some questions that I would like to work through with you guys. So as an outline, first of all, why should we teach adults how to program in the first place, and kind of what benefits that we can get out of it as developers? A brief comparison of the traditional education model to some alternative teaching models. A summary of kind of what we've learned in different things through there, as well as our lessons learned and this open discussion section. So why should we teach people to program? Programming is not just about learning skills, it's also about teaching a way of thinking. So depending whether or not people are interested in going into coding professionally, it's a good skill set to have and to learn. There are lots of job opportunities, and everyone that's in development right now keeps getting headhunted by recruiters all the time. There is an extreme shortage, especially of certain skills. Technology is always changing, even if you're an experienced developer, where does professional development and continuing education fit in? And if you're like me, you just want to learn because it's fun. Okay, so as developers or teachers, or I'm not sure what everyone's background is here, why should you teach other people? For me, I am fairly new to programming professionally, and one of the ways that I have gotten a lot better is to learn by teaching. So learning by teaching, by presenting and doing different things, these workshops, I have learned different parts of the languages and tool sets that I don't get to work with on a daily basis at work. It's also a social good thing, makes you feel good. We have actually, from our company, because of the outreach that we're doing, been able to get some name recognition and recruit new developers to our company as well. So if your company is having trouble hiring, like so many companies out there, getting your name on things can really help. It's also self-promotion. I'm going to admit that I do have a little bit of an ego, so it is kind of nice to get recognition every now and then. And it's a great way to network as well, not only with all of you guys, but also with other speakers and people from around the world. So teaching and the concept of how we teach programming to adults is not just central to the US. This is a global problem. There are skill shortages in a lot of developed countries, including the US, UK, and Canada. So kind of what this means, it means that there are sometimes candidates that may fit criteria, but they may not have the right skills. And sometimes this, and I'll go into kind of why this or how this can happen. What some companies are proposing is to import new developers or trying to outsource to meet the demand. But what I think, and this is a little more personal, what I think we could do as companies here in the US is to take individuals who, and part of tech schools too, take individuals who may be looking for jobs and provide them with the right skill set and training through these professional development programs. The other thing is that a lot of new grads are having trouble finding jobs in computer science because maybe their skill set doesn't match up or they're mostly theoretical knowledge. So something to kind of bridge the gap for new grads as well. Okay. So a little more expanding on that. So who are these potential adult learners? They're students, traditional students, working professionals who may be looking for a career change. Little side note on that we do have, it's part of Gr8Ladies, a very, very inspiring woman who has been working in QA for many, many years, but always kind of wanted to learn how to code. And it's very inspiring to see her working actively towards getting a job as a developer. Even me, everyone is taking advanced skills. They're here learning new technologies at code camps and other places. Another market that hasn't been very well addressed in general are moms or dads, won't discriminate, who may be returning to the workforce after a break, but they may need skills as well. So that bridging the gap in that transition phase. So currently, the traditional model of education includes two different things in the US. Here, and this was the path that I took and that many, many people take. It can be a 4-year education or grad school is optional. The things that we're learning in traditional education are mostly theoretical. Now, they are things that translate into learning other skills, but as far as learning hard skills and things that we can apply to work on day one, it's a little bit more limited. However, on the other side, I did get a very well-rounded education. I went to a school that focused on writing and a little bit of public speaking and made me take these classes as part of my education. So there is the great part of the traditional education system. Another one of the weird things with traditional education, switching tracks can be very expensive. It's for me, I switched majors about halfway through, and it was costly both in time and money. The average, and I tried to do a little research to back up and have some numbers here. The traditional college cost of attendance for 4 years is running about $100,000. Cost of attendance includes tuition fees, dorm, any money or debt you would accrue before scholarships and loans by not working for 4 years. If we compare that, the other traditional model is to go to a community or tech college, like the one where we are today. Tech colleges do have a great focus. They're traditionally very job skills focused, have a much shorter completion time, much shorter or much lower cost of attendance. So that number I got from North Hennepin, but it seems pretty, in a lot of the research I did was about the same: tuition, books, fees, living expenses. At a tech or community college, you may have classes just to be able to take 1 or 2 classes for a certification or something that you need as well. So kind of juxtaposed to that are these new alternative models of education that are coming out. Okay, so what does this mean? First one, online courses. Online courses are definitely changing the way that education across all subjects is taught. There's different options. You can take classes from traditional universities or colleges for credit. You could do a completely online degree, and then there are these one-off classes kind of on an interesting subject. They're taught generally as one of 2 different methods, either as a massive online course, you may have heard of a MOOC, or self-paced courses as well. The experience across online courses is very variable. You may not have access to professors or teaching assistants if you're doing a self-paced course or have a very, very large class, as is typical of several MOOCs. The cost varies, curriculum is varied. The one interesting thing of note here with online courses and doing some of my research was that online courses have much lower completion and grade rates than traditional sitting in a course. For one of the studies I was reading, it ranges anywhere from 5 to 12% of people enrolled in an online MOOC don't actually finish it. So very, very low completion rates. Another alternative to online courses are these beginner tutorials that are popping up online. I have 3 listed here. Well, I'll go through. First one is Code Academy. So Code Academy is a great resource. And if you are interested in links, I do have these slides, and I have posted them on Speaker Deck, but I'll make sure to tweet that link again. So that all the links and everything are there. Code Academy is great. It is very beginner level though, so we're getting that gap again. If you're a math person, Project Euler, I think it's pronounced, is a very great way to transfer from generic math concepts into programming problems. And another one that got a lot of funding is the Khan Academy. This one is great not only because of its excellent coursework in computer science, but it also expands into a lot of other areas as well. Okay. So we kind of went over online courses as one of the alternate methods to learning and teaching. Another one is code schools. So code schools are generally from 9 to 12 weeks. Sometimes they can be called a boot camp. They're often focused on job placement and often sponsored by several of these organizations that are looking to find developers. I found out about code schools first when I was living on the East Coast near New York City. So I have 2 really great examples. The first one is the Flatiron School. They are a little pricey. For their course, it's $15,000, but it's very, very focused education in Ruby or iOS are their 2 big ones. It does look like from their website that they're expanding out into other markets now. The other major one in New York is called Hacker School, and this one I had a connection to as well. My high school roommate went to Carleton College, some of you may know. It's a physics major. It's what she wanted to do. After she graduated, went to hacker school in New York to learn how to code professionally. And they placed her at Tumblr, which shortly thereafter was bought by Yahoo. So they definitely do have some great connections and job placement in some of these courses. The course itself is free, and she actually has some diversity groups. As a female in computing, she was sponsored by Etsy to pay for her living expenses while she was there as well. Their model is, in comparison to learning just basic examples, Hacker School leads you through a project of your choosing and makes it a lot more personalized. In general, there are lots of dev boot camps popping up around the country. I was in Iowa a few weeks ago and found out that I think it's Iowa State. One of the colleges in Iowa has a great one over the summer to learn various different languages for 6 weeks, 12 weeks, these boot camps. Okay. So we're here at a weekend code camp, learning about different technologies. In addition to this general code camp structure, there's also language and stack focused learning. So this is where Gr8Workshops in my program fits in to this alternate education model. We are loosely based after Railsbridge and Closure Bridge. Has anyone heard of those or participated in one? Okay, so these are language focused. The idea is that on Friday night you do an install, have classes all day Saturday, maybe Sunday, depending on your learning level, and have a better understanding. But it's not meant to be a learn everything in one weekend. It's meant to be repeated. Every time you go, you learn something new. And like I said, this is where our Groovy workshops kind of fit in. So, as a summary of the different education models, there are many different ways to get to a career path in programming. Every individual learns differently, so multiple options and different ways are necessary. It may take one or more different programs to achieve a goal of becoming a professional programmer. In summary, there's two main paths or curricula, either teaching concepts or theory or teaching language-specific tools and skills. There are different teaching styles, whether it's going through examples or spending a semester or a time on a particular project. With online classes, you may have a self-guided course or a traditional group setting. The content for a lot of programming education is either on web applications, scripting language, or just basic trivial examples. Another great thing, it's never too late to learn. I didn't point it out when we were going through those pictures, but some of the pictures that I've used in this presentation came from our workshop, and we have all different levels, all different backgrounds. It's never too late to learn how to code. And everyone from every background level, not even just age. Okay. So what are some lessons that we learned from great ladies and the Gr8Workshops in particular? So actually, might be a good stopping point too. How many people either have taught or are interested in teaching to other people? Okay, so probably just over half. That's a pretty good number, so hopefully I can provide some helpful information. The first thing is to identify your audience. So what we found is that there were 3 basic experience levels: people who have never programmed a day in their life before, some people who may have gone through these tutorials through some of the weekend courses, but they aren't or don't have a professional job. And then the third basic level are experienced developers that are looking to learn something new. Another important thing to keep in mind is what their goal of education is. So, are they looking just to learn job skills, or are they looking just to kind of see what this programming thing is all about? Or do you have someone who's seriously considering a career change? Because how you tailor your education and how your program is structured should take this into consideration. It's also important to find out the background of everyone in your audience so that you can assess maybe the pace or learning topics. For example, when I first taught our first Gr8Workshop, I normally run the advanced track and went around the room, said, hey, what's everybody doing? They were mostly students or either college juniors or seniors or professional Java developers, and everyone in the room had seen Java before. So it was a really great way that I could make translations from Java to Groovy, and everyone kind of was on the same page and knew what was going on. To dive a little deeper into that, you may not have a course where everyone is a Java developer and it's really easy to translate in between the two. So it's important to think about what people may not have had access to, particularly when we teach my co-founder who teaches the intro class. When we were first coming up with a curriculum for it, we had to think about basic web skills. So someone who's never programmed before doesn't know how HTML, CSS, and JavaScript work. And we kind of had to step back, and now she spends a good portion of the course just going over basics of web programming. Another thing that came up, we take a lot of tools for granted. Even something like source control, you may need to teach some prerequisites about that as well. Command line and your IDE or your tools. Found that it was very important to standardize it and make sure that everyone was using the same tool so that we could help them when they needed it. Programming concepts as well. Object-oriented programmer was a very tough subject to teach in a weekend course, and still something that we're struggling with for very, very beginners. So we're not sure where we're going to do for the next workshop, but we're kind of taking some of these things into consideration. I was very lucky to have functional programming concepts in my undergraduate experience, but I have worked with some programmers that didn't have that going into or after graduating, that they had mostly focused on web and hadn't done any kind of scripting, IO work, anything else. So there's also taking into consideration concepts and things people may not have seen before. Realized I did not do this on my slides even, but defining all your jargon and acronyms, including REST and APIs, that's on the bullet point above it. And to simplify the exercises. So we found as we were going through the very, very beginner courses that sometimes if we made the examples too math-based, even concepts that coming from a traditional computer science education, math was a very, very strong part of that. Math could be a bit of a stumbling block for people who may not have that educational background. So like I said, it was very important. Another thing we learned was to standardize the development environment. Multiple machine configurations. Everyone's got different laptops, different ages, different operating systems, and it was very important that we did everything. Assume that nobody knows how to work any of the programs. It's always better to over-explain something than to leave it out and then you get a whole bunch of questions. We found, originally we posted instructions online, said, oh, download 1, 2, 3, and 4. We came in the morning of, I had originally planned about a half an hour to do the setup, thinking maybe somebody might have run into a few problems. Found out that almost the entire beginner class was struggling just with the setup itself. So now we're going to offer that time Friday night just for the beginners to get their environment set up and have people there that they can answer or have and answer questions. Another part of the setup, if you are doing a supervised setup, is to make sure you pick a location with good Wi-Fi. We picked the central library, which has okay Wi-Fi. but downloading things was very, very slow. So if you don't, the other alternative to that is that we started carrying around a USB drive with all the setup files, and would plug that in when the Wi-Fi, we would get as many on the Wi-Fi as we could, but it was faster to go around with the USB stick. We did have a couple cases where even the experienced developers couldn't get one of the programs running on one of the machines. It was a much older Mac operating system, and we couldn't get the right version of Java installed. And that's one of the the basic foundations for everything of Groovy. So there is, in research, if there is for your language and whatever you're teaching, a web console or other thing that you can use as a backup. So now we provide that as well. Specifically in our beginner classes, learning something new is intimidating, or it can be. So remember to have a welcoming attitude at all times, and that anyone helping you and your TAs as well. And if you notice that maybe they're getting frustrated with a particular TA, you can help them out or change it to a different person. The more TAs or teaching assistants you have, the better. The overall experience we've seen, things that make sense in general. Not only just so that you can divide the workload, but it also provides a different viewpoint. So, trying to think of a specific example. I was trying to teach a particular concept. I can't remember what it was, but I kept saying it over and over again, and it wasn't getting through. And one of the TAs was able to, in 2 sentences, explain it with using a different analogy, and all of a sudden I got it. A little frustrating for me, but great for the students' experience. Another thing with beginners is, what language do you teach them to start? So Java was one of the first languages that I learned in high school. It's very practical. A lot of companies are looking for it, but it has very frustrating syntax. And I've noticed this throughout the years, that a lot of people that are first learning with Java get frustrated and quit. So when I went to college, the intro class was actually taught in Python, which has a lot less syntax and is a lot easier for beginners to learn. And I've seen this throughout. There are other programs that are using Python as well. So one of the objectives of the Gr8Workshops initiative is to teach and use Groovy, and propose that as another beginner language, because it takes away a lot of the boilerplate from Java while still teaching programming concepts. And I would be lying if I told you that we had everything solved. So there are still some ongoing challenges that we are facing. The biggest one is, do you wait for everyone to catch up or keep moving? Especially in the beginner classes, and if you have students that may be repeated from other classes and they've seen similar concepts before, they may be wanting to move on, but others still need some refresher. One of the we've been trying is to give more examples, more time to work on things, but most of this came down to time. So the first time that we tried to teach, we went to conferences and got a 1-hour time slot and failed very miserably. 1 hour is nowhere near enough time to teach such broad concepts to a true beginner. What we ended up doing, because we were slowing down to keep up with the beginners and had lots of questions, is to consider a follow-up session. So last time it was originally just for a Saturday. A couple weeks later, second one, to kind of finish up, wrap up, and do some more examples. One of the things ongoing that we'd like to do is to address this transition state where there are people going through courses where they've learned a little bit but haven't gotten their first job, or using a language on a daily basis. So we'd like to find a solution to address those intermediate level students. Another kind of side thing that's in here just because it's great ladies is marketing to diverse groups. So several people, and as I've gone through, have tried to teach things, women's only classes. Some people like it, some don't. Don't just make it pink. There was a talk at Grace Hopper about this and design principles. And it's not the idea of literally just the color pink, but don't overdo it. If you're trying to market to women, you don't have to make it all about that. Another great way to get women into a course is to offer scholarships. Makes it a lot more accessible. One thing that I haven't been able to do that I like to be able to do in the future is for parents to offer childcare. This is a big thing coming up at conferences and teaching events to get more people out. Avoid using gendered pronouns and adjectives. Even at one of the talks I went to this morning, was getting a little frustrated with some of the examples that were being used. And images, things like that. Okay, tangent. Any general questions about any of the material before I go into discussion? And again, ways to follow me for more information. Yes?
Has Gr8Workshops or any of those virtual classrooms?
I would love to. I am trying to get hold of the technology and everything. It is a little more difficult to do virtual classrooms because sometimes you may want to see what's on the screen or be able to sit next to someone and help them. But we haven't gotten to that point yet. So, yes?
Just an FYI, there are technologies such as just forgot the name. WebEx and stuff that do allow you to see another person's screen.
Yeah.
And connect with them.
From what I've used WebEx at work, it's mostly one at a time, right? So you would be able to see, you could do one on work.
Right, but you can switch it between users, and there's also, text feature to it where you can.
Yeah. There was a demo at the last mini demo in Minneapolis. Is it last one or two before? Where they're coming up with a virtual classroom idea where you can switch in and out and have recorded tidbits and lots of interesting things coming down the education pipeline. But that's something we haven't looked into yet. Anything else? Okay. So this was to have a group discussion. So what format did everyone experience going through? Did everyone go to kind of a traditional either college or community college? Or has anyone gone to any of these boot camps or online schools?
I've been taking classes from regular school online, and I lost interest in okay. So I have to actually be physically present in my room. I've done both a traditional route and I'm currently going to school here. And when it comes to like those online courses, I find that they can be a lot more labor intensive than actually just going to a class because they're trying to make up for that time that you're not in there. But I do see the difference between being here and being at UWC. There is a little bit more hands-on here, but I do appreciate the additional education that I got that I am not getting at a technical college. I also went to some of the private colleges, and I regretted leaving the technical school system because the education was just as great, but less expensive.
Yeah.
So I've had training. So I've gone through the technical college, gone on to a 4-year college, and then had training too, where people would come in and then gone to other conferences. And all of the experience kind of have their own different feel,
Yeah.
and the knowledge that you get from them, and I think that that's been described by everyone, and written by you.
Okay, so along the same lines, we kind of went into this. Do you feel you would have benefited from a different format? We mentioned cost was a major thing, and the experience varies as well.
I was speaking with a friend of mine who's also a student here, and he was saying that he likes a lot of the online classes because he's an intermediate programmer a little bit, so he can skip a lot of the stuff that he feels is boring or he already knows.
Yeah.
But like someone else had said, that I really have to be in the room. I get too lost in online classes, so I think that the tech school is like the right format for me. Just that nice balance of hands-on and instruction at the same time, and little else.
Most of the technology classes here are called hybrid.
Okay.
Which they have, instead of meeting all in the classroom or all online. Yeah.
I kind of have done both a little bit. I go to school here, but when I'm in a subject, I will work on it on my own on different alternative things. Or also a lot of the stuff I'm interested in isn't covered here. So I learn that way. And I don't know, that's been kind of helpful for me. So I'll feel like I'll have an instructor teaching me something that's they'll be there when I get confused and doing something crazy, and they can help me understand the basics. But then while I'm in the class, I can be going past what the class is doing and learning, more interesting stuff. But if I get confused, I still have an instructor to go back to be like, hey, I'm doing this, like, what's going on?
Yeah, and I mean, having a professor or teaching assistants that are accessible was a very important thing to us as starting the Gr8Workshops, as well as a lot of the research that I found in online courses. Is that's one of the main complaints and reasons for low completion rates. Okay. So do you think that the initial, what I'll call the initial training experience or the first degree, before you get that first professional development job, do you think that the format is very different, or how does that compare to continuing education?
I was taught C, but then I became employed at Groovy. So even though the concepts are the same, I was totally but I think those SQL databases were the same.
Yeah, it was probably the most used, databases was probably the most useful course I took in undergrad.
Yeah, because it doesn't change. It's logical. I don't know, I guess it would have been like now next week I'm going to the Twin Cities for a week-long training specific for my job in ASP.NET, and I'm excited because I don't, like work's paying for it. I don't have to pay for it out of pocket, and I'm just kind of frustrated at the school that I went to do which is right now. I guess it's hard when you're not employed and you're going to school and they're telling you this is what you need, and then when you become employed, you find out, oh, I didn't really need that. I needed something else. And that's frustrating. Or
the catch-22 of you need a certain skill to get a job, but without the job, you don't have the cash to get that skill.
So it's like learning independently on my own is the best. If I'm interested in it, then I can learn as much as I can. I guess work sponsored training.
Yeah, and even if so, one of the things and why this came up is that I work for a company with 5 developers. There were other small development shops using Groovy and Grails in Minnesota that don't really have the time or resources to do individualized training for their company. So this is a lot of our sponsors are just sending their own people and sponsoring us. Okay. what was the?
I think one difference between initial training and continuing education is, that I found, is that you have to pay for your continuing education. It can be expensive. And sometimes, in order to get a cheaper option, things get crammed into a small amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's more difficult.
Yeah, it is. And from a teaching perspective too.
What is meant by continuing education?
So experienced developers, or not even just experienced, but working developers, as technology changes, because if you think about, so what companies were hiring for 10 years ago compared to now, if you've stayed with the same company, you may need to learn, I mean, there's all these new technologies
So
coming,
we're just talking
NoSQL
about
databases,
technology
and
changing in
yeah.
general.
Well, I think continue.
And what one thing that we've kind of moved to as far as teaching is that we are trying to train students how to learn on their own, to go out to resources, online resources. So we want students that are actually going out there at the same time that they're taking the class and practicing more. So teaching them about APIs, teaching them how to look up the documentation for what they're currently working with, but then they can do it for the next language that they want to look at.
I would think that as part of a continuing education, especially in the technical field like this, there are concepts and whatnot that carry over from what you learned before to whatever you're trying to learn now. There's a lot of programming concepts that are the same no matter what language you're learning, so you don't have to learn that part over again. You already have that part. So therefore, you're maybe more of an intermediate learner there as opposed to beginner. Kind of my perspective.
On a few, of course, this is like when that company sent you for a week or a day to learn something. A lot of times what I'll hear is the person doing the training will say, well, this is usually a 5-day course, but we're going to teach you to you in 1 day. I'm like, oh, great. So, more coffee.
Yeah. Well, actually, that brings up another thing. So the first time we did this, it was maybe 9 hours in 1 day. And after about hour 6, everyone was starting to get tired, and there was no amount of coffee. It was just too much information thrown at once. And so we're adapting.
In one session, whatever it is, an hour, a 2-hour session, a lot of people, when they go home, they remember like 3 concepts from whatever that thing was. And so if you present 26 concepts in an hour, people are going to remember about 3 of them.
Wow.
And then you'll have to go online and catch up with the other 23.
Yeah. And that's interesting, because I find, especially as someone who's fairly young in my career, I go to talks that are often over my head, just kind of because I wanted to learn something, and then I'll get the first 5 minutes when they're doing that review section. But as I hear about it more and more, eventually it'll click, and I'm starting to get to the point where I understand more advanced concepts. Just I've heard them several times.
So when you're teaching Groovy, are you also utilizing Slack as the testing?
So we generally do, well, so Spock is,
I just heard about it today. So
it's exciting. I was like, that was actually a really good talk. We do use Spock. One of our modules is in TDD with Spock. There are other testing frameworks as well in Groovy land, our Groovy ecosystem. And depending on the setup, the rest of the setup is what you do. But Spock's going to be the most popular one.
I've been here before. I was a computer programmer who was interested in since I was 19 years old, and everything was over my head. This is like the first year. I'm like, oh yeah, because I do this.
Yeah. And the concepts are similar. The more you learn, the more it makes sense.
Maybe like in 5 years, it'll be like teaching.
And that's actually, so that was the learning by teaching thing. In teaching very, very intro and beginner courses, the things that I learned a while ago, well, not as long ago, but it's a good refresher and a good place to start. And you don't necessarily have to have that much experience to teach a very intro and beginner class.
I think the first camp that I came to for, some guy was really upset because he dedicated like a year of his life to learning something that by the time he mastered it, it was like obsolete.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, you know, what am I gonna invest my time and energy and life into if it's, is it gonna be something that's gonna be around? You know, if anybody has that fear.
Well, in some form,
Yeah.
languages, when you learn one, you know, a lot of them.
That's kind of a discussion, yeah. And so you said you were going to training soon for ASP.NET, and that'll be on a framework. And you could go to training on Groovy,
Languages, yeah.
training on Spring source stuff. You can go through that and you can learn those things. We've been talking with other tech colleges. I've gone to some of the IT conferences that they have, and a conversation was had about not focusing so much on the framework because those are going to change. There are going to be new frameworks that we'll use next year, but teaching students how to learn, and that's why I mentioned that, is that if you have the skills to pick up the new skills, that's what you really need. Exactly. Well, in this industry specifically, because some other industries, you don't. It's not exactly the same that you need to pick up something every year, 2 years, whatever.
Yeah, in this new thing, this is how you do it with Word. And this new language, this is how you get data
Yeah,
from database.
that's usually how
Yeah,
I
I was
approach
kind
it.
of obsessed with learning everything, and I realized it took me like 3 lifetimes to do that. And I got to a point where it's like you don't have to know everything, you just have to know where to find the information, and that was like a huge relief. So I mean, even though I don't know everything, I know that I can like the keywords and the references.
You
I
can
know.
find all the answers.
Exactly. So when I need it.
And you start with the fundamental concepts.
And really what they teach here is they teach you multiple different languages and which give you those building blocks to say, okay, so I understand how these work. And once you've learned 2 or 3 languages, I haven't learned any except for JavaScript yet. But you know, once you've learned those few languages, it's that much easier to learn another one. And even that much easier to learn another one. It's like regular languages. Like, yes, a second language is ridiculous to learn, and that first one is even like the hardest. But the third one, you know, builds off of those other 2, and then the fourth one builds off of this other one. And so after you've learned like 4 languages, realistically, to learn another one will take you.
They're all loaded with the same concepts.
Right, and a lot of the same
verbs,
wording and things.
Yeah.
And so what you're learning here is the verbs, nouns, for programming. You know.
Every book is just a word put together in a different order.
Yes, and that is that.
Oh, so that's an interesting concept because so in thinking about different programming languages, there are different, I mean, functional compared to object-oriented compared to like the different types, which if you're using, so there's like, I mean, our traditional letter sets or different character sets and things. So there are slightly different.
It was difficult to go from procedural programming to object oriented.
Yeah.
That was tough.
New concepts.
Yeah.
But and those are the get the base concepts, and then but there will be multiple object-oriented programming languages.
I'm trying to remember what did we do before Google?
I went to the library. I used to find a catalog.
All
Well, you
big
did
libraries.
textbook.
Yeah, the different social network then.
Yeah.
Yeah, the touch people.
Instead of the screen.
Yep.
So along the same lines, do you think that we are teaching tools or that teaching concepts that will transfer? So I think we've
Yeah.
yeah.
Beat slide.
It's a very good question to lead from the other question.
Yeah. So these were things that I thought I wanted to touch on in our discussion, and it's kind of where it went.
What
Yeah.
CVTC does well is it teaches tools that you eventually learn the concepts from, so that you can. I know when I went to school here, by the end of the fourth semester, I was realizing myself how similar languages were. And there's a lot of times it's just the syntax is different. You can Google syntax. You just need to, but learning the basic concepts really helps.
I know one thing that's been hard for me in classes before is when the tools are too specific or whatever. Like, yeah, I know in our PHP class, like we had to use NetBeans, you know, and I was comfortable with a different editor, but it showed like the project isn't gonna build right in the environment if we weren't using NetBeans, however he had it set up or whatever.
Yeah. Well, that's part of the standardization thing, because there are so many different environments. It's easy to pick one. That way you know where everything is, and I mean, because
It's also,
yeah.
It's just you always try to get really, really good at your environment. So it's just like, you know, your muscles just do their thing.
The shortcuts and the keys, yeah.
And when you have to bounce around to different ones and be like, oh, I've always used this editor for this programming language. Now I have to relearn another one, or, you know.
But, you know, the thing is that once you're done with school and you get out into the workforce, they may require you to use a specific editor that you've never used before. And if you're so comfortable with that one
Maybe
editor.
even when you hate.
Yeah.
Like I use Notepad++ right now. Okay, so I'm trying to force myself to use them. They're trying really hard because I know that I need to be more flexible, and an employer is going to appreciate that flexibility. And as technology changes, so are those text editors, and like you have to be flexible to be able to change with technology.
Well, them won't change.
If Vim changes, it wouldn't be Vim.
It'll be 3,599. You'll still be using them if you find like an aging portion or something.
another reason is that, you know, you can't expect the instructors to be able to help you if there's 50 different, you know, IDEs that are being used. So, you know, because the instructor can't be expected to know every one of those.
Yeah,
So they
but
gotta pick one that they
they
can
can
help the
always take
student.
the code and put it in whatever one they use and just help you with the code.
Yeah.
Because if you're using a different one than what you're being taught, you don't need help with the editor.
Yeah.
You already know that.
Yeah.
You know.
I mean, you could probably get your plugins and everything working in a different. So you said it was NetBeans. Is your alternative Eclipse?
I was using PHP Storm when I did PHP.
Oh yeah, JetBrains is.
Or
pretty good.
Vim. But I mean, it wasn't a huge deal. It was just something I thought of with like tooling. Sometimes that gets a little like, oh, I've got my development environment all set up. Oh no, I have to use NetBeans.
Yeah.
I had to use that for my class too.
No ripping on the teacher or anything like that.
I don't know if they're at the same time. Like,
No, I mean, but JetBrains is so we use JetBrains at work now they have IntelliJ for everything
What's
Java
your
Groovy. I'm sorry?
What'd you say?
IntelliJ? But that tends to be a more enterprise and companies with more expensive tools because it is a little more expensive. But NetBeans is free and available. So that's, I've used that before, even in a professional environment. And for PHP. Let's see. So we have a few more minutes, I think. So one thing I don't know the answer to, and that I've always wanted to know the answer to, is where should someone start who wants to learn how to code?
Like, somebody that,
Yeah.
because I had an instructor that said, go to the learn how to program for kids sites, because kids don't really sit around like, oh, I'm gonna learn how to program unless maybe their parents are. And I mean, it's like simplified, like there's some good ones that have like little games that the kids play, but behind the scenes is learning how to like, it's all statements and so that's my advice.
Our code is one of the areas with the IT Academy class. Was very good. Very good, decent all ages approach, and yeah, just a lot of gamified like that.
I would say it depends on what the reason is they want to learn to code, which I think we kind of covered earlier. I mean, if they're looking for a specific, somebody's applying for a job in Ruby, then you want to find something that caters to Ruby only. But if you're looking for a couple of different languages as a developer, you're going to need something that kind of caters to all of them in a way. For
Yeah, I think the Python's easier.
There's a really good book called Learn to Program that I forget the gentleman's name, but it's on Pragmatic Bookshelf. And he wrote a book for his daughter, who was like 12 or something like that, to teach her Ruby. And it's like ended up turning into a spectacular book for adults to learn how to program, because it's one of the only ones that just really breaks it down. And you know,
a bunch of jargon over your head.
yeah. Learn to program. I can get that.
Coming into the program here at CVTC and knowing pretty much nothing about programming, Brian Hogan was in charge of doing the introductory the programming fundamentals, and he does an excellent job of teaching basic level programming. A lot of people I've tried to learn from explain it, and it's like a few people have said the jargon or things they say are just too like they don't understand that we don't understand the basics. And Brian does an excellent job of conveying those, and he knows that you don't understand it. And I've just really appreciated him. And I don't know if anyone just listened to his Elixir talk. I mean, even in there, it was very simple, very basic, and I've never done any functional programming, and I was able to follow along extremely well.
Yeah, he talks in Minnesota too.
Finding someone who loves the code and loves to teach.
Wasn't me.
No, it wasn't.
So I really do think like age and experience. Although I don't know that gender so much plays a role into like where you go to learn code.
And it shouldn't. And it shouldn't.
No, it shouldn't. It should be pretty neutral there. But I mean, age. I mean, a kid who's 8 is gonna want to learn differently than a kid who's 13, or a teenager who's 17, or somebody in their 20s, somebody in their 30s, somebody in their 40s. They all learn differently, and different things appeal to those different age groups. And there's also different levels of experience when you go across that board too. So I think of all of those things, age really plays the biggest proponent on how somebody learns and where you should point them to learn something.
I don't know if the code section is the same as some of their other subjects. The Khan Academy that you have a link for, I know for some of the other subjects, it's excellent for breaking it down just into its little pieces and explaining them very well. So I'm interested in seeing the code side of it.
There's another site too. I don't know if you're interested, it's Coursera.
Yeah, so they link.
I mean, that's like free classes at your own pace, maybe it's set up like regular school, but they have specific as well. Like Khan Academy was the first one to come out that I heard of. So that one,
Yeah, and they were probably close to the top of the Google search because they just got a bunch of funding. But Coursera, yeah, is more general, like what we were talking about with the online courses and MOOCs. I took a class through there that was not very good and didn't complete it. I mean, there's a wide range. Yeah, so those are other options. I think, what is it? There's an iOS one from Stanford that's supposed to be like the best way to learn iOS.
Yeah, because one of my online classes, I was like going on YouTube and had some professor at Yale teaching that class because they didn't actually have a teacher and they didn't get videos. So I was learning from like other schools that were online.
See, that's what I like about online classes. I think a lot of them, it really teaches you, or helps teach you how to teach yourself.
Yeah, to get creative on ways to teach yourself as well. Yeah.
You don't always have that professor there. They may be an email away, but that's never as fast as you're having the problem, because you don't want to settle this problem until, Monday, get the email back. You want to solve it and move to the next one. Yeah, well, I don't.
Yeah. Just to